All right, today we are diving deep into an origin story that has literally shaped thousands of years of faith, culture, and conflict. We're going to trace the incredible journey of a people, starting from a single, divine promise and following them all the way to the edge of a fabled land. Let's get into it.
It sounds a little crazy, right? A wrestling match with God? But what if I told you that this exact struggle is at the very heart of how an entire people got their name and a huge part of their identity? Stick around, because the answer connects us to a story that's been unfolding for millennia.
You know, to really understand our world, sometimes you have to go back. I mean, way back. Not a couple hundred years. We're talking 4,000 years ago. Back to a time of nomads, ancient empires, and one single promise that set a whole people on an absolutely epic journey.
So our story really begins not with a nation, but with a single family and a monumental promise, the promise of a home.
Okay, so who were these first Hebrews? Well, they were descendants of Noah's son Shem, which makes them Semites. And here's a really crucial point a lot of people miss. This ancestry is actually shared by both Jewish and Arab peoples. Now, out of this group, a man named Abram is chosen for a special mission. He's told to take his family and cross the Euphrates River. And that simple act, that crossing, is where they get their first name, Hebrews. It literally just means the people from across the river.
So they're crossing the river, but where are they headed? To a place called Canaan. In their sacred text, this place is legendary. It's described as a land flowing with milk and honey. You could just picture it, right? This wasn't just about getting a piece of real estate. This was the promised land, a powerful symbol of a divine blessing, of prosperity, and of a future for their people. It was the ultimate destination.
Okay, so a promise is one thing, but an identity? That's something else entirely. And for the next generation, that identity would be forged in a really strange and incredibly powerful encounter. So now we meet Abram's grandson, Jacob. As the story goes, on the eve of a really daunting return to his homeland, Jacob spends the entire night wrestling with the mysterious figure. Some interpret it as an angel, others say it was God himself. He doesn't necessarily win the match, but he endures. He doesn't quit. And by morning, he is given a new name. He is told, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." This is so important. The name Israel means he who strives with God. So the identity of these people isn't about simple, quiet obedience. It's about struggle. It's about engagement. It's about wrestling with big questions and enduring. This one event names not just the man, but the entire future nation of his descendants, the Israelites. And here's a fascinating little detail that shows just how deep this story runs. Jacob was injured in his hip during that wrestling match. And to this day, in memory of that struggle, some observant Jews follow a dietary custom of not eating the sciatic nerve of an animal. I mean, think about that. A 4,000-year-old story, right there on the dinner plate.
So the Israelites had their name and they had their promise. But the path forward, well, it was anything but straight. So how did they go from being this special chosen family to becoming slaves in Egypt?
Well, it was a pretty dramatic reversal of fortune. Jacob's 12 sons founded what became the 12 tribes of Israel. To escape a terrible famine in Canaan, one of the sons, Joseph, brings the entire family to Egypt. And at first, they're welcomed. They do really well, their population booms, and that's when the trouble starts. A new pharaoh sees their numbers not as a good thing, but as a threat. And just like that, they're turned from honored guests into slaves.
So years and years of brutal slavery pass, but liberation was coming, and it would arrive in the form of one of the most iconic figures in all of history. And here's just an incredible piece of irony. The man who would free the Israelite slaves was raised as a prince of Egypt. Moses, an Israelite by birth but adopted into the Pharaoh's own family, he would be the one to lead his people out of bondage.
The story of the Exodus is just epic. Moses receives his mission from God on Mount Sinai, then a series of 10 plagues devastates Egypt, which finally compels the Pharaoh to let the people go. And their escape is sealed with the miraculous parting of the Red Sea, a moment of divine intervention that becomes an absolute cornerstone of their faith.
But escaping slavery was only the first step. Yeah, they were free, but they were also a pretty disorganized group of refugees out in a desert. To actually become a nation, they needed a foundation. They needed a set of rules.
So they returned to Mount Sinai, the very same place where Moses received his calling. And it's right here that they make the huge transition from just being a collection of tribes into a true nation, bound together by a shared legal and moral code.
And that code is, of course, the Ten Commandments. But these are so much more than just rules. This is a blueprint for society. The first few commandments define their relationship with the divine. But then the rest of them govern human relationships, honoring family, protecting life, ensuring justice. It's a code for social cohesion from the highest principles of faith all the way down to the basic rule of not stealing from your neighbor.
You know, looking at this list today, it's pretty amazing how enduring these principles are. I'm really curious what you think. Of these 10, which one presents the biggest challenge for our modern world? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely love to see what you have to say.
All right, so they have their freedom and they have their laws. Now only one thing remains: to finally go and claim the promise that was made to their ancestor Abraham all those centuries ago.
But this wasn't a quick trip. The journey back to Canaan took 40 years. And this wasn't just a physical journey. It was a period of testing, of purification, and of preparation. A whole generation that had known slavery had to pass away, so that a new generation, born in freedom and raised under the law, would be ready to enter their new home, led by Moses' successor, Joshua.
And in a really poignant final chapter to his own story, Moses, the man who led them this entire way, gets to see the promised land from a mountaintop. But after a lifetime of struggle, at 120 years old, he dies before ever setting foot in it himself.
So, they've finally made it. They have the law that binds them and the land that was promised to them. But the journey is far from over. The ultimate question still remains. Can this confederation of 12 tribes, forged in slavery and tested in the desert, actually unite and build a lasting kingdom?
Well, that story, the era of judges, of kings, and the building of a great temple, is exactly where we're headed in our next explainer. So to make sure you don't miss it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.